There was a half-naked man grilling bratwurst on my private dock when I got back from a quiet weekend in the hills, and I swear for a second I thought I'd stumbled into a weird lakeside hallucination. He had a folding chair nailed into the planks, a cooler labeled Dock Boss, and a little camp stove duct taped to my wooden railing. Sizzling sausages like this was his personal resort. When I asked what he was doing on my dock, he looked up with this ridiculous grin and said, "Oh, I'm Everett." Margie said I could use it whenever. It's community property now. I just stood there blinking, trying to figure out which part of that sentence made less sense. Margie, my neighbor/HOA president, giving away something that clearly isn't hers, or the idea that a cooler with Dock Boss written in Sharpie gives you legal rights. I didn't yell. I didn't throw him in the lake. I just took a deep breath and walked back up to my house, because if you know Margie like I do, you know that any reaction is fuel for her fire. Now Margie wasn't just your average HOA busybody. No, she was the kind of woman who built her identity around enforcing power she barely had. Her yard was pristine, sure, but it also had 4 surveillance cameras, a rotating list of passive-aggressive lawn signs, and a history of rule changes that seemed to always benefit her directly. The shrubs she had planted last year to separate our properties? She claimed they were aesthetic zoning recommendations. I knew better. But I also knew this dock wasn't up for debate. I built it. I paid for it. I pulled permits and signed paperwork and had every nail inspected by the county. So when I saw Everett sitting there like the Duke of Bratwurst, claiming communal rights because of a conversation with Margie, I didn't get mad. I got methodical. See, what Margie didn't know, and what made this all a little poetic, was that I work in marine transport. I specialize in moving houseboats, pontoons, even floating wedding venues. So when I built my dock, I made it modular, detachable anchor points, hydraulic brackets, even storm-rated float stabilization. It looked permanent, sure, but it wasn't. Not really. And that detail was about to become very important. I started gathering everything: permits, construction receipts, zoning confirmations. I put it all in a binder thicker than a high school yearbook. Then I called a few old friends from work, guys who'd seen worse than an entitled HOA president and a sausage-loving squatter. I explained the situation, and one of them just laughed and said, "You mean Lake Margie? Say no more." 2 days later, I walked into the weekly HOA meeting wearing my calmest smile. Margie wasn't there, but her vice president, a man who looked like a nervous beige cardigan, gave me 5 minutes to speak. I handed him a folder labeled "Unauthorized Dock Occupation and Boundary Abuse," filled with GPS maps, notarized letters, and photos of Everett's dock shenanigans. He started sweating before I even finished. That same day, I got word that my crew had arrived. We parked a barge out of sight in a nearby cove, and I prepped the dock's anchor points under cover of night. Everett, still on my dock now with a sun umbrella, a Bluetooth speaker blasting yacht rock, and a net he clearly didn't know how to use. He waved to kayakers like he was running for office. And then at 9 a.m. sharp we began. The operation was clean, smooth, quiet. For cables, 1 hydraulic trigger. No noise, no fuss. The dock began to drift slowly, ever so gently, away from the shore. At first, Everett didn't even notice. He was too busy singing along to come sail away and burning another brat. But by 11 o'clock, we were a good 30 feet off the shoreline, and he finally stood up, wobbled a little, and shouted, "Hey, why's the dock moving?" He stumbled toward the edge, nearly tipping his cooler overboard, and then screamed something into his phone, probably to Margie. Cue the chaos. Margie came sprinting onto her lawn in a bathrobe and slippers, waving her phone like she was calling in an airstrike. She yelled across the water that I was committing dock theft and holding her uncle hostage. I just sat on my porch, sipping lemonade and watching like it was Sunday matinee. The sheriff's boat arrived around noon. 2 deputies pulled up beside Everett, who was now sunburned and clutching his cooler like it contained state secrets. They asked if he was being held against his will. He muttered, "No," but the guy's being a real jerk about it. They turned to me next. I met them on my shoreline with my binder, my permits, my smile. They reviewed everything. One deputy actually chuckled when he saw Margie's fake HOA dock authorization with her name in glittery ink. They told her this was a civil matter, and unless she could produce legal documents contradicting mine, she should stop wasting their time. I'd like to say that ended it. But Margie doesn't know how to lose quietly. That evening, She stood on her porch with a bullhorn, declaring that I was endangering community water safety and had until sunrise to return the dock. I turned on classical music from my patio speakers and raised a glass of Merlot. She screamed something about citizen's arrest. I smiled and flipped a burger. The next day, I found an envelope taped to my front door, a cease and desist letter on fake HOA letterhead, citing violations that didn't exist. My lawyer, Eli C. Deadpan Genius with a dry wit, laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. "Keep everything," she said. "We might get a real show out of this." And oh, did we. 3 days later, Margie filed a small claims suit on behalf of Everett, alleging emotional distress, illegal transportation, and loss of recreational enjoyment. Elise prepared our case like it was a cooking show. Clear steps, clean ingredients, no drama. We had video of Everett grilling sausages mid-lake, audio of him telling deputies he wasn't kidnapped, GPS data showing the dock never left my property zone. The judge took one look at the file, raised an eyebrow, and ruled in my favor before Elise even finished. The courtroom burst into laughter when we played the clip of Everett offering beer to a kayaker while singing Tiny Dancer. Margie stormed out before the ruling was complete, muttering something about legal bias and conspiracy. And that, my friends, was the beginning of the end for her. At the next HOA meeting, I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The board brought up her fake documents, the cease and desist, the unauthorized zoning claims. Then Sharon, the news secretary, stood up and called for a vote to remove Margie as president. 9 votes in favor, 1 against. Hers. She left the meeting without her clipboard, without her smug grin, and without her power. Everett came by the next week to collect his cooler. He looked about 10 pounds older and 10 years more tired. He apologized, not in a big, dramatic way, just a quiet, sad little mumble. She said it was legal. I didn't know better. I nodded, handed him the cooler, and said, "Next time someone gives you something that isn't theirs, maybe ask a question." Since then, the dock has become kind of a legend. Some call it the Freedom Float. I added solar lights, a canopy, and even a little brass plaque that reads, "Property of Tyler moved once, never again." Neighbors fish off it, couples watch sunsets, kids jump into the water. It's not just mine anymore. It's ours. But now it's respected. As for Margie, her house sold 2 months later, at a loss. Last I heard, she'd moved to a gated community 2 towns over and was already in a fight about mailbox paint colors. Some people never learn. But here, things feel different now. The HOA board rewrote the bylaws to prevent unilateral decisions. Transparency is the new standard. And me? I stayed off the board. I belong here, dockside, with the lake in front of me and peace in my chest. And every now and then, someone walks by and says, "Hey, you're the guy who towed his dock with a guy still on it, right?" I just smile, sip my coffee, and say, "Yup." And he never came back. Let me ask you something. If someone tried to take something that was rightfully yours, not with force, but with manipulation, lies, and fake permits, what would you do? Would you let it go? Or would you, like me, find a way to float the nonsense away? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was I right to do what I did? Was it justice or just a little bit of poetic revenge? Let me know how you would have handled Margie. And if you've got a HOA horror story of your own, I'm all ears.